Open your Bibles, but I don't know where yet. Haven't decided where I'm going to start. Before I do start, this is part of the message. I'm going to read two messages. I am thinking about last night's teaching while at work. I am realizing I'm confused about Bozrah. Well, you shouldn't be confused about Bozrah because I haven't really taught on Bozrah yet. That's tonight's message. God willing, if I get there. That's tonight's message. So stop being confused about something I haven't taught on yet. If it's a mountainous region itself, then the waters would flow towards the Dead Sea like they do from Mount Hermon. That's right, it is a mountainous region. Bozrah, right on top of it. It used to be a city right on top of that mountainous region. And several streams flow down those mountains into the Sea-Red Brook, which I'll show you later in the map. So my question is, does Bozrah also have similar geological characteristics of Mount Hermon, with the underground springs and rivers, as there is also a great battle to be waged there? Not quite the same, but it is a mountainous area, not as high as Mount Hermon. And how does the depth of the waters of the Dead Sea fit with the horse's bridle description of Revelation 14:20? And I've had several messages that listen to me and listen to others, I guess, or read other material, and just can't calculate how much blood that would be in, say, the Jordan River, the Sea of Galilee, the Hula Lake, and all the way down the Dead Sea, and from Bozrah to the Sea-Red Brook down into the Dead Sea. First of all, it's not going to be all blood. Blood is not going to replace water. You want to experiment with blood and water. The next time you cut yourself, don't do it on purpose, but the next time you cut yourself, you find yourself bleeding, drop a few drops of blood into a glass of water and see how little of blood it takes to stain, say for instance, an 8-ounce glass of water. It takes very little to stain it. It won't look like pure blood. It will stain it red or reddish color. It doesn't take that much blood. And people have been arguing about this for the last 100 years, especially the last 50 years. Well, they base it on the assumption that water would be displaced by blood only. And it would take, I saw one calculation, which is the more accurate calculation, I think it was 160 some trillion liters of blood. Now, a human being have an average of about 5 liters, I believe. You did the number. We don't even have that many people in the world, not even close. Stupid arguments. Legalistic arguments. That don't understand that John is painting a picture of what it's going to be like, but some of it is figuratively presented to us in the scriptures. You don't take it literally like the whole river of the Jordan and the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee and Lake Ula and the Sea-Red Brook is going to be just blood. These are people who just like to argue for argument's sake. Who cares how deep the waters of the Dead Sea are? If the surface part of it looks like it's red, Mission accomplished. And how does the depth of the waters of the Dead Sea fit with the horse's bridle description in Revelation 14:20? Most people never heard of any of this stuff that I presented. It's sure not really taught much in the church world. So I understand there's going to be questions. Especially concerning this picture that's painted here about the blood up to the horse's bridle. National Geographic, I think it was the earlier part of this year, February, March edition. I could be wrong about that, but it's pretty close to that date, month and date. Had an interesting article about the Jordan River. Let's just take the Jordan River. By the way, the average depth of a Jordan River, the average is between 3 and 10 feet. In rare occasions, because seasonal rains are more seasonal rains happen in any particular year, for some reason, like here in California, average rain in Southern California, I think it's like 13 inches or some odd per year, 13 point something. But like every 15 to 20 years, we get somewhere between 25 and 30. So the Jordan can swell to about 15 to 18 feet in depth. But that's just on occasion. The average depth of the Jordan is somewhere between 3 and 10 feet, depending where on the Jordan you're looking at. It gets down to 1 to 3 feet in some places. So, where this battle is going to take place, at least concerning Mount Hermon and Bozrah, let's take Mount Hermon, for instance. Between Mount Hermon, the valley area, and then into that cup-like shaped Lake Hula, one of the wine presses, by the way, I think there's 2. I haven't got to the second one yet. It's fairly shallow in that area. Knowing the lay of the land, because I've studied it, it's not a stretch of anyone's imagination, including mine, to see how these scriptures could come to pass, specifically in that area, because that is where the battle is going to take place. Do I think there's actually horses there? Not necessarily. Maybe a few. But John's just presenting what he could perceive at the time and trying to relay it. God knows what it really is going to be. It could be tanks. It could be some armored vehicle in our modern day. So stop taking this so literal in this case. It's more figurative. But say it was horses. In that general area, many times from, let's just say Dan to Lake Hula on the map. And Dan is just located north of Lake Hula. Biblical Dan. those streams are not very deep. And there's several of them that flow into Lake Hula. Further down, after Lake Hula to the Sea of Galilee, and from the Sea of Galilee to Jordan River, like I said, anywhere from 3 to 10 feet. And who cares about the Dead Sea? How deep it is, if the surface layer is covered with the surface of a blood-stained water body throughout the Dead Sea, both the northern and the southern part of the Dead Sea, and including even what flows down from Zered Brook. Which brings me to another question. I'm interested. Please continue with this part of this teaching. You mentioned the headwaters near Bozrah as being at the southern terminus of the 1600 furlongs. How will the bloodstained water make its way upstream to these headwaters? Because Bozrah sits on a mountainous area, and streams flow down, if you look on the map there, right here, northward in this map, but flows down the mountain and empties out into Zered Brook. The Zered Brook flows into the Dead Sea. Nothing flows out of the Dead Sea. Jordan River flows into the Dead Sea, and that's where it terminates. Zered Brook flows into the Dead Sea, and that's where it terminates. That's an easier question to answer. But back to that interesting article in National Geographic. The article covered a story that's happening in Israel today, especially around the West Bank area, which would be this side of Jordan River and up here, but mostly down here, between the Sea of Galilee and Jordan River. They're noticing a serious drying up of the river. Why? Refugees. Refugees, most people don't even realize, are flowing into this area, even from Syria as we speak today. Obviously for the problems they're having in Syria. And not just refugees flowing into the area because of the Syrian problem, but other areas also. No one wants to stop and contemplate the real problem Israel has right now. A massive usage, because these refugees are, and many of them, and it gave you all the calculations how much water they are taking out of the Jordan River for all their personal uses. And the volume of water that's being taken out of there daily even shocked me. Now, just say that's not the case, because it'll keep raining, and the streams keep flowing down from Mount Hermon, filling up Lake Hula, all the way down the Sea of Galilee, and then eventually the Dead Sea. Don't box God in. What if they would experience year after year, say the next few years, the kind of conditions we're seeing here in California, especially Southern California? We haven't seen an average rainfall year in many years. I think last year we got, I don't even know if we got half of the 13. That's why you hear, if you're across the nation, and definitely if you live in California, are drought concerns. The city that I live in, you can't even water your grass most days. You can't wash down your sidewalks because we're trying to conserve water. If you do, you're going to get fined. If you do it on your off days. And there's more off days now than there ever was, as far as my memory serves. All the reservoirs are drying up. What if God sent a drought? Don't tell me it hasn't happened before. Look at your biblical history throughout the periods of time. What if God sent a drought? What do you think is going to happen to this area? I don't know how God's going to plan this out and what avenues he takes to accomplish what his word declares. But stop boxing God in with your shallow mindset, is what I'm trying to say. We preach the verse, we read the verse, we try to apply the verse. All things are possible with God. Until you read his word, and some of the things that in his word doesn't sound very possible. Snap yourself out of that mindset. All things are possible. His words already declare it. And no matter what avenue he takes, like I said, he'll accomplish every jot and tittle what his word says going to happen. Period. Well, you know, even if it didn't, even if there was no drought, even if there was no refugee problem that's draining the Jordan River dry, or part of the reason. The average depth of the Jordan River in most places is 3 to 10 feet on the average, where some places only 1 to 3 feet. So if you want to apply the scripture literally, then fine. Then know your geographical layout of the land and the topography of the land before you make a judgment on how can this be possible. It's very possible. Period. It doesn't take a brain surgeon or rocket science to figure it out if you crack a book or two. That's the easy part. The more difficult part is trying to piece this all together scripturally. That's where you have to be extremely careful and not create some Christian science fiction doctrine. Now, with all that said, I want to move on to the board. Go to the board. So I'm getting the question, how do you get a Hebrew furlong? How do you get these measurements? Well, Revelation chapter 14. Verse 20. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horses' bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. I told you what the Greek for furlong was, stadia or stadion. And I showed you on the board that a Hebrew furlong, depending who you want to believe, averages around 606 feet, and some believe it's 606 feet exactly. That's fine. So I took 606 times 1,600, got 969,600. Divide that by a mile, and the reason why I did a mile, because it's a Greek word that's used in the New Testament. And we're living under they were living under Roman rule, so I used Roman lineage estimations of distances, and I came up with 5,280 feet, which we still use today, which comes out to 183.7, rounded up to 184. And if you wanted to take the Greek understanding of what a stadion is, and not apply the Roman distance, linear distance to it, then you would take the 608 feet times 1,600 furlongs, you get 972,800,000 Divide that by 5,280 again, you get the 184.24, which rounded down to 184. So 184 either way, so I had no problem with it. And that's how we figured out a Hebrew furlong. Now, taking the distance of what a Hebrew furlong is, this 184 miles from Mount Hermon to Bozrah is exactly 1,600 stadians, or the Hebrew equivalent of a furlong. Now, you might think that's all a coincidence, like I said. I don't think so. You could try all other types of linear measurements. It doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. And like I said, the 606 is the equivalent to a Roman stadion. In a Hebrew, which I didn't put on the board, furlong is about 1/8 of a Roman mile. Which comes out to 4,854 feet. But that's just the 1/8 of a Roman mile. But you use the 5,280 figure, which is a mile, you get the 606 times 1,600, 969.69 divided by 5,280, 183.7, which is 184 miles. The distance from these two places. Now, that's all fine dandy, but I don't understand anything about Bozrah. That's why we need to understand about Bozrah, because none of this here, and I didn't have a chance to get to it last Sunday evening, none of this here makes any sense unless we have a starting point and an end point, or point A to point B. We covered point A for the most part, but there's a point B. Jesus does not stop at Mount Hermon, is what I'm trying to say. Now, I probably should have gave you these figures after I covered Bozrah, but some of you got it, and you understand that Bozrah is an important point in this teaching, location, where another great slaughter will take place. This is just the beginning, folks, Mount Hermon. Jesus also comes down to Bozrah. Now, you're asking probably, where's Bozrah? Let me see if I can find it on a map, and I'll point it out to you. You see it there in the board, but let me give you another look at it if I can find anything on this map book I have here in my hands. Maybe I don't have anything here. It'd be a shame if I don't, but you come back to me as I try to find something here. I probably won't. Looks like I won't find anything, but maybe I just could show you on this map here, even though you see it on the board, but this has a little bit more topography to it. Here on the board, here on this map, you have Mount Hermon right here. Let's see, Mount Hermon right there. Dan, Lake Hula, going down the Jordan River to the Sea of Galilee. Going further south, the Jordan River, it empties out in the Salt Sea, or it's just Salt Sea, the Salt Sea or the Dead Sea. And then you go further down, you have the Zered Brook right there. You see it? It kind of flows in to the southern part of the Dead Sea. Well, right here, in this mountainous area south of the Zered Brook, in the Edomite territory, is where Bozrah once stood. Right in this area. So, this slaughter that happens in Bozrah, the blood would flow down these mountains, not as tall by no means as Mount Hermon, but they're still mountains. And the blood would flow down to the Zered Brook eastward. This Zered brook drains into the south end of the Dead Sea, and it flows in eastward. You got it? That'll give you a better understanding where this is at. Now, where is Bozrah? Well, if you look at a modern map today, and you look at Jordan, it's on the eastern border of Jordan, about the middle of it. Jordan would be all this board on the right, for instance, with all the figures on it. And about halfway down Jordan is about the center area of the country. On the eastern border, you would find Bozrah. Now, Bozrah is about 15 miles southeast of the Dead Sea. It was once the capital city of Edom. Now, according to the Old Testament, the city was the homeland of Jacob's twin brother Esau. Now that you have a better understanding where Bozrah is located, I want to go back to the teaching where I left off on Sunday evening. We looked at Revelation chapter 19, several verses there. Let's just start there tonight and read those verses once again. I have time. And let's start with verse 13. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. Actually, we start with verse 11. I don't have time. You could review it starting with verse 11 and work it down to verse 13. And then it reads, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And the 15th verse, and out of his mouth go a sharp sword, that with it should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. He threadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. And we said that winepress was like Gula, but could there be another possibility of an additional winepress? That's the question. Now, in Isaiah 34, you go there quickly. Get ready to write again tonight and take notes. Isaiah 34, what does it say? We were there last Sunday evening. Verse 6. The sword of the Lord is filled with blood. It is made fat with fatness, and with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams. For the Lord had sacrifice in Bozrah. This is the day of God's vengeance. In Bozrah, and a great slaughter in the land of Idumedia. Idumedia will be in this general area on the board. Down here, even below the board, but in this general area. For the Lord had sacrificed in Bozrah, looking ahead, which still hasn't happened yet, and a great slaughter in the land of Idumedia. Now, go to Isaiah 63. Let me just give you all the verses first. Isaiah 63, verse 1. Who is that cometh from Edom? With dyed, circle that word dyed. It means to be stained in red. Stained in blood. Who is that cometh from Edom, which dyed with garments from Bozrah? Here we have Bozrah again. This that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatest of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Wherefore art thou red in thy apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine fat? I have trodden the winepress alone, and the people there was none with me. For I will tread them in my anger, and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my remnant. For the day of vengeance is mine heart, and the year of my redeem is come. And I looked, and there was none to help, and I wondered that there was none to uphold. Therefore my own arm brought salvation to me, and my fury it upheld me. And I will tread down the people in my anger, and make them drunk in my fury, and I will bring down their strength to the earth. Here, Isaiah 63, 1 through 6, ask who is coming from Bozrah with garments like he has trodden in the winepress. And then you go to Jeremiah. Go there, chapter 49. We'll just jump along to verse 8. Dealing with Edom once again in Jeremiah 49. But we'll move along to verse 22. And it says here something very interesting. Behold, he shall come up and fly as the eagle, and spread his wings over Bozrah. And at that day shall the heart of the mighty men of Edom be as the heart of a woman in her pangs. A woman in her pangs. It seems that at the main battle site further north, the battle site of Mount Zion on Mount Hermon, Jesus trod the winepress there, as we already covered. In that valley area, near that bowl, as I said, area in the foot of those mountains, where the invading armies have all assembled. Now, from Mount Zion at Mount Hermon, go to the board. From this location, Jesus then is to head south to the mountainous areas near Bozrah. And once again, there's another bloody slaughter. And this is why Jeremiah 63, starting from verse 1 down to verse 5, and the last verse we just read, Jeremiah 49, verse 22, tells of Jesus flying like an eagle coming from Bozrah, with garments already stained with blood, as if he had trodden the winepress. Now, presumably, he is seen flying like an eagle on his way to effect another bloody slaughter. And you go to Isaiah 31, verse, well, I'll save that one. Go to Jeremiah 48 since we're already there. Go to Jeremiah 48, verse 40. Verse 40. 38, verse 40. My pages are stuck together. Hang on a minute. New Bible. Jeremiah 48, not 38, 48, verse 40. What does that say? For thus saith the Lord, behold, he shall fly as an eagle, and he shall spread his wings over Moab. So like I said, he's seen like an eagle on his way to another bloody slaughter. Jeremiah 48:40 seems like it would apply here, but this time a smaller winepress called the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which is closer and more around Jerusalem, is also implied here. And of course, to understand that, we need to turn to Joel chapter 3 once again. Go to Joel chapter 3, verses 11 through 15. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the press is full, the fats overflow, for the wickedness is great. Multitudes and multitudes in the valley of decision, or threshing. It's a better translation. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of threshing. The sun and the moon shall be darkened, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. And the Septuagint reads this way: So the Lord of hosts shall descend to fight upon Mount Zion, and even upon her mountains. When we look back now at Isaiah 31, the first winepress, you go to Isaiah 31, verse, I know this sounds all confusing. That's why you need to re-listen to it and write all these verses down and go back and forth. So I'm trying to cover a lot in a short amount of time tonight. Isaiah 31, verse 4. For thus had the Lord spoken unto me, like the lion and the young lion roaring on his prey, with a multitude of shepherds he has called forth against him. He will not be afraid of their voice, nor abase himself, for the noise of them shall the Lord of hosts come down to fight for Mount Zion and for the hill thereof. As birds flying, so will the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem. Defending also, he will deliver it, and passing over, he will preserve it. Now, here in Isaiah 31, verse 4 and 5, and Jeremiah 48:40, implies of a smaller winepress called the Valley of Jehoshaphat. When we read Joel 11 through 15, specifically in verse 12, which seems to be in or around Jerusalem. And like I said, the Septuagint makes it sound like it's around Mount Hermon, which it can be, because this is also a valley of decision up here. So could it be because it's repeated twice, once in verse 14 and twice in verse 14, we're talking about two valleys of decision, or two valleys of threshing? Well, whether it is or isn't, that remains to be seen. But one thing we do know, Jesus comes back, deals with the assembled rendezvous in this mountain area of troops, armies of the Gog Magog coalition, and a bloody slaughter is taking place. A bloody slaughter described where even blood flows up to the bridle of horses. And of course, if you take the average height of a horse, which could be anywhere from 4 to 6 feet, the bridle, that is, of an average horse, depending on what kind of horse, what kind of breed, and so forth. I don't necessarily think they're going to be actual horses, but wherever they are, blood will flow. And the only way that can make any sense is that blood flowing from Mount Hermon into Lake Hula, down through the Jordan River into the Sea of Galilee, down through the Jordan River into the Dead Sea, and also from the Zered Brook, takes place, where not only on the surface, but for several feet down, blood will be mixed in with water and give the illusion that a bloody slaughter took place, because blood is now mixed in with the water from the slaughter. Now you have the winepress in that valley of decision, and you have a winepress possibly in this valley, which, by the way, in the Zeebrugge area, flowing down from Bozrah, the topography is different, where the valleys are very distinguished. Not so much in Mount Hermon area, even though there is a valley there, and everybody recognizes there's a valley there, but in Zered area, the brook area, there's no doubt about it, topographically speaking. But if you take it figuratively, which I don't think you have to, because this is what's going to happen. Because Jesus is going to come down. He's had enough. Time has fulfilled, and all things will come to completion, and he will put the enemies in a position where this slaughter is not going to be for the weak-hearted. It's not going to be a pretty picture, because he's coming with vengeance, and he's coming with judgment. Now, the reason I believe most people don't preach on this, because it's not a peaceful message. It's not Jesus-sounding type message. The first time he didn't come to bring peace, he came to bring a sword. He brought the message of peace for the ones that do acknowledge who he was and why he came, and that only he provided the rescue plan. Everything else is a false doctrine that leads to salvation. Only he's the way. It's through him. He is the way. He provides life. Now, those who don't accept that, acknowledge it, and bow down to it, and decided to join this coalition, and now is present there at that mountain site, whether it's the Mount Hermon area or the Bozrah area, and also another area, but I'm not going to get into that right now. There's going to be an accounting. As I said in Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 9, and chapter 3, verse 15, where that which is to be has already been. If you look at these verses, something interesting to note down, that Jehoshaphat, like Joshua, by the way, which we looked at last time, won a great victory against a multinational force when the Lord once again fought for Judah and the children of Israel. You could find those battles in Joshua 11 and 2 Chronicles 20 if you want to read it on your own. What comes around goes around. Same thing's going to happen in this battle of Armageddon, this Gog and Magog war, where God will judge in the Valley of Threshing decision by again fighting for Israel. But this time, he appears in his coming back again to rule and reign. Now, it's not by coincidence, go back to the board, stay there. It's not by coincidence that between Mount Hermon and Bozrah, the location of both these slaughters, whether you want to accept it as a second wine press or not, that's fine. That's not either here or there at this point. But you do have to recognize that there's going to be two slaughters. There's actually going to be three, but I'm only dealing with two now. Mount Hermon and Bozrah, because the other third slaughter is not into the equation of this 1,600 furlongs or stadia. Mount Hermon and Bozrah, 1,600 furlongs, where blood will flow, as we read in Revelation chapter 14, verses 19 and 20. Let's just read it as I finish tonight. This is as far as I can go tonight. And the angel thrust his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was thrown without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horses brought of the space of 1,600 furlongs. And I've read every single thing out there. I've heard as much as I could stand of all the explanations. Some of them are very super spiritual. Some have just got bad history. Some of them don't even know what was ruling at the time, so they use a different linear measuring method. You name it. There's only one way to look at this, folks. The only way this makes sense is looking at the scriptures, and there's other scriptures, but I gave you enough scriptures for now, that Mount Hermon is where this slaughter starts. And it reaches all the way down to Bozrah, 1,600 furlongs. Jesus, after he's done with Mount Hermon, he's perceived as flying like an eagle, whatever that's going to mean. Who knows what he's flying? That's a mute point. They perceived it in the scriptures as flying like an eagle. Flying where? South towards Bozrah, where another slaughtering is going to take place. See, Satan's plan A, using the agents of the nations that hate it so much, has always been to surround Israel. They're going to surround Israel from the north, they're going to surround Israel from the south, where there's no escape for it, for that nation. And they think they're going to win. Well, I got news for them. As soon as Jesus is done with Mount Hermon area, in that slaughter, the greater slaughter of the two, he's flying down to Bozrah, perceived like an eagle, and he's going to take care of business there. And the slaughter there is going to have the blood flowing down the Zered Brook, emptying out the Dead Sea. And from there, I believe, he's going to penetrate through that eastern wall in Jerusalem on the mount. Well, I'll just leave it there. You could speculate till Jesus comes, and you could read a lot of stuff out there concerning what this 1,600 furlongs consist of and how they define it. It's almost laughable. You almost want to deny the truth, especially after you heard it. And I went through it very quickly, but how can you question what the scriptures say? It gives us the points where Jesus, the physical points on a map, where Jesus begins this and ends this slaughter. Like I said, you could argue all day long whether, and it's a mute point, whether it was 2 wine presses or just 1. We know Mount Hermon is going to be one, and it's going to squeeze the blood out of these enemies of God. I also believe Bozrah has another wine press, and that slaughter is going to take place there. Coming from the north, coming from the south, throughout these 1,600 furlongs, blood's going to flow. Blood's going to flow. God's word, just as it says, as we read, will come to pass. And there's nothing anyone can do about it. You can try to clean it up all you want. One message says, well, how is all this blood going to dissipate? Is that your question? Really? Jesus on the scene is not remarkable enough that it finally now has arrived? You're worrying about how the blood's going to clean up? Who cares? That's Jesus' problem. He'll figure it out. Some of you are starting to sound like these Christian science fiction people. Thinking of the bizarre and not sticking what's flat out right in front of your face. There's only one explanation that makes sense, that adds up. It has to add up. Like I said, it doesn't matter if there's 1 or 2 wine presses. What does matter is how to fit this 1,600 furlong in. Because if you can't, then something's wrong in God's word. That there's nothing wrong with it. Once you know the geographical points that are so important, that gives us the markers on land where this begins and where this ends. And it just happens to be the 1,600 furlongs, or the stadiums, which adds up remarkably the same distance as a furlong would add up in the scriptures, if you use a Hebrew linear method. Coincidence? I don't think so. Now, that's as far as I'm going to go tonight. Review the scriptures that I gave to you quickly about Bozrah. There's others, but review those. Those are the important ones that you need to recognize, that there's a slaughter going to happen there too. And Jesus is going to be part of both. First, taking care of what happens at Mount Hermon and flying down to Bozrah and dealing with that. And like I said, which I'm not going to get there just yet, he crashes the eastern wall that's been blocked in by the Muslims and reopens the gateway where the Holy of Holies used to be. Now, exciting times ahead, folks. But that's not all. Who's going to be with them? And why? That's next. Play a song.